The ring on the table. The gold signet ring lay in the center of the conference table like evidence from a murder. Sophie Bennett stood beneath the cold white lights of the private hospital wing, surrounded by men in black suits and women dressed in quiet luxury. Beyond the glass wall behind them, snow pressed against the windows of Boston, covering the city in a pale silence that did not reach the room. Two security officers guarded the door. A detective stood beside Sophie with a pair of handcuffs hanging from one hand. Caterina Vitale sat at the head of the table. She wore a black silk dress and a diamond cross. Her silver hair was arranged perfectly, and her expression held the calm satisfaction of a woman who had already decided how the meeting would end. The ring had been discovered inside the locker of Sophie less than 1 hour earlier. It belonged to Alessandro Vitale, the man lying unconscious in the room beyond the next set of glass doors. The man whose name made judges lower their voices and powerful men check the locks on their homes. The man Sophie had kept alive through 2 surgeries and a night that had felt endless. Caterina touched the edge of the velvet evidence bag. "You entered the private room of my nephew when he could not defend himself," she said. "You removed a symbol that has belonged to our family for generations. Then you concealed it inside your locker." Sophie kept her hands at her sides even though they were trembling. "He gave it to me." A quiet sound of disbelief moved around the table. Caterina did not smile. "My nephew has not been conscious since he entered this hospital. He was conscious for several seconds before the second surgery. There is no record of that. I was there." "You were alone with him," Caterina said. "That is very convenient." Sophie looked toward the glass doors. Machines surrounded Alessandro. A ventilator controlled his breathing. Bandages covered his chest and shoulder. He looked motionless beneath the sheets. But even unconscious, he seemed to change the atmosphere around him. Sophie had spent nearly 30 hours listening to his heart monitor. She knew every shift in its rhythm. She knew the slight tension that entered his jaw when pain reached him through the medication. She knew the scar beneath his ribs and the older bullet wound near his spine. She also knew what he had whispered before his eyes closed again. "Do not let them take it." Caterina leaned back. "Detective Mercer has agreed to handle this privately. You will return the ring, sign a statement admitting what you did, and leave this hospital without causing further embarrassment. I will not confess to stealing something that was placed in my hand." Detective Mercer stepped closer. "Miss Bennett, you should consider how serious this is." Sophie turned toward him. "I understand exactly how serious it is. A man was shot. Someone tried to kill him. Yet everyone in this room seems more interested in a ring than in discovering who put 2 bullets in his body." The silence changed. Several men looked toward Caterina. The older woman studied Sophie with colder attention. "You are confused about your position." "No," Sophie said. "I am a nurse. My position is beside my patient. You are the people preventing me from getting back to him." One of the younger men pushed away from the table. "Enough." His name was Damien Vitale, the cousin of Alessandro. He had spent the night giving orders to doctors while refusing to donate blood when they discovered he was a possible match. Damien pointed at the ring. "That is not jewelry. That ring is authority. Men have died for touching it without permission. Then perhaps you should ask why he trusted me with it." Damien moved toward her. Caterina raised one hand, stopping him. Sophie felt the detective take her wrist. Cold metal touched her skin. Beyond the glass wall, one of the machines began to sound. Sophie turned immediately. The heart rate of Alessandro was rising. His fingers moved against the sheet. No one else noticed. "Wait," Sophie said. Detective Mercer pulled her other arm behind her. "Do not resist. He is waking up." Caterina remained seated. "The doctors have said that may not happen for days. His blood pressure is rising." The detective closed one handcuff around the wrist of Sophie. Inside the medical room, Alessandro moved his head. His eyelids opened. The ventilator tube had been removed that morning, but an oxygen mask still covered the lower half of his face. He dragged it away with one hand. A nurse rushed toward him. Alessandro ignored her. His eyes passed over the people surrounding the table. Then, they found Sophie. His stare became terrifyingly clear. "Why?" he asked, his voice rough and barely audible. "Is she not wearing my ring?" No one moved. The detective released the wrist of Sophie. Caterina slowly stood. Alessandro pushed himself upright despite the blood spreading beneath the bandage across his shoulder. His face tightened with pain, but his gaze never left Sophie. "I asked a question." Sophie stared at him. She had heard men describe Alessandro Vitale as a monster. She had seen bodyguards become pale when his pulse dropped. She had watched surgeons check the hallway before speaking about his condition. Now every person in the room looked afraid. Every person except her. She stepped toward the glass door. Caterina placed herself in the path of Sophie. "Alessandro, you are disoriented." Alessandro looked at his aunt. His expression held no affection. "Move." Caterina did not obey. "The girl stole your ring while you were unconscious." Alessandro slowly turned his eyes toward the gold signet resting on the table. Then he looked back at Sophie. "Did you give it to them? They found it in my locker." "That was not my question." Sophie lifted her chin. "No." Something unreadable passed through his eyes. "Good." He looked at the detective, removed the handcuff from her wrist. Detective Mercer hesitated. Alessandro reached toward the medical tray beside his bed. His hand closed around a pair of surgical scissors, even weak, barefoot, and connected to machines. He made every armed man in the room tense. "The handcuff," Alessandro said. "Now?" The detective unlocked it. A red mark remained around the wrist of Sophie. Alessandro saw it. The calmness left his face for one brief second. It was replaced by something darker. "Who touched her?" No one answered. Alessandro pulled the intravenous line from his hand and placed his feet on the floor. Sophie rushed through the glass doors. "Do not stand." He tried anyway. His knees weakened. Sophie caught his arm and pressed one hand against his chest. "Careful of the wound. Sit down before you tear the stitches." His bodyguards stared at her as though no one had ever spoken to him that way and survived. Alessandro looked down at her hand against his chest. Then he looked into her eyes. "Put the ring on." "Sophie, I am not wearing anything until you explain why you gave it to me." A shadow of fascination moved across his exhausted face. Caterina entered the room. "You cannot trust this woman." Alessandro lowered himself to the edge of the bed. His breathing was uneven, but his voice became steady. "I trust her more than anyone in this building." Caterina stopped. Alessandro reached past Sophie and pointed at the ring. "Bring it to me." Damien obeyed. Alessandro took the ring, but instead of placing it on his own finger, he held it toward Sophie. Every person in the room watched. Sophie did not move. "What does it mean?" she asked. "For now, it means that anyone who harms you has chosen to become my enemy." "That does not answer my question." "No," he said. "It does not." Their eyes remained locked. Alessandro closed his fingers around the ring. Then he turned toward the family that had gathered to condemn her. "You accused the woman who saved my life. You allowed a corrupt detective to put metal around her wrist. You entered my hospital room without my permission." Caterina stiffened. "We are your family. That is why you are still breathing." The room became completely silent. Alessandro looked at Luca de Santis. The tall bodyguard, standing near the door, sealed the floor. "No one leaves until I know who arranged the shooting." Luca inclined his head. Alessandro looked at Sophie again. "And she stays with me." Sophie should have felt relieved. Instead, she felt the weight of every hostile eye in the room. The ring was no longer only evidence. It was a target. 36 hours. Earlier, Sophie had been halfway through a cup of cold coffee when the first black vehicle crashed through the hospital entrance. The emergency department of St. Augustine Medical Center was quiet at 3 in the morning. Snow covered the streets outside. Only 2 ambulances had arrived during the previous hour. One carrying an elderly man with chest pain and the other carrying a college student who had slipped on ice. Then the sound of gunfire echoed from the lower parking area. The glass entrance doors opened. 4 men in dark coats entered, carrying a 5th man between them. Blood covered the front of his white shirt. One of the men shouted for a surgeon. Sophie abandoned her coffee and ran forward. Put him on the stretcher. The largest bodyguard blocked her. Get the chief of surgery. You can wait for the chief while he dies. Or you can put him on the stretcher. The bodyguard looked down at her. Sophie did not step back. She had been a trauma nurse for 9 years. She had treated drunk drivers, wounded police officers, frightened children, and men who tried to hide weapons beneath hospital blankets. She had learned that fear could wait. Blood could not. The bodyguard obeyed. Sophie cut open the shirt of the wounded man. 1 bullet had entered below his collarbone. Another had passed through his side. His skin was cold, but his pulse remained strong beneath her fingers. His eyes opened. They were nearly black, even through pain. They focused with frightening control. "What is your name?" Sophie asked. His gaze moved across her face. "Alessandro." "Stay with me." "Alessandro." A bodyguard stepped forward. "Do not use his name." Sophie pressed gauze against the wound. "Then you keep him alive." The man became silent. Alessandro watched Sophie as she called for blood, ordered the trauma room prepared, and pushed the stretcher through the emergency doors. His fingers closed around her wrist. The strength of his grip surprised her. "There is another shooter," he said. "Where?" "Inside." His eyes shifted toward the hallway. A man wearing medical scrubs stood beside the elevator. He did not carry a hospital badge. Sophie saw his hand moving beneath his jacket. She threw herself across Alessandro. The first shot shattered the light above them. The second struck the metal frame of the stretcher. The bodyguards returned fire. People screamed and dropped to the floor. Sophie felt Alessandro move beneath her. His arm came around her waist, turning his body so that he covered part of hers, even though he was the injured one. The shooter disappeared through a stairwell. Luca and 2 men pursued him. Sophie lifted her head. Alessandro was looking at her. "You covered me," he said. "You were already bleeding." That was not an answer. Neither was that. For one strange second, while alarms sounded and broken glass covered the floor, something changed in his expression. Then his eyes closed. Sophie pushed the stretcher towards surgery. The first operation lasted 3 hours. The surgeons removed 1 bullet and repaired damage near his lung. The second bullet had passed through without striking a major organ. But blood loss and the strain on his heart made his condition unstable. The hospital administration closed an entire floor. Men with weapons guarded every entrance. No one openly said who Alessandro was. No one needed to. Sophie recognized his last name when she saw it on the chart. Vitale. The family owned hotels, restaurants, construction firms, and half the waterfront properties in the city. Rumors said they owned more than that. At sunrise, Caterina Vitale arrived with lawyers, security teams, and a private physician. She spoke softly and expected immediate obedience. Sophie disliked her before the woman had finished crossing the hallway. Caterina stopped beside the hospital bed. Has he spoken? Only when he arrived. What did he say? Medical information is private. I am his aunt. That does not make you his medical proxy. A younger nurse looked horrified. Caterina turned her head toward Sophie. You are very protective of a man you met several hours ago. Sophie adjusted the medication pump. He is my patient. Caterina touched the blankets near the hand of Alessandro. His signet ring was still on his finger. The movement appeared affectionate, but Sophie noticed that Caterina tried to remove it. The swollen knuckle prevented her. Caterina released his hand. No one enters this room unless I approve it. The attending physician has authority over patient access. The attending physician works in a building financed by my family. Sophie met her gaze. Then perhaps your family should have purchased a hospital where nurses are afraid of you. Luca turned his face away, hiding what might have been amusement. Caterina stared at Sophie for several silent seconds. Then she left. The condition of Alessandro worsened before noon. Internal bleeding forced the surgeons to prepare for another operation. While the team gathered outside, Sophie remained beside him, checking the incision and replacing a blood-soaked dressing. His eyes opened. At first, they were unfocused. Then they found her. You stayed. I am working. He tried to lift his hand. Sophie caught it. Do not move. He ignored her. His fingers twisted the signet ring. Pain tightened his face. What are you doing? Take it. She thought he was confused. The ring will be here when you wake up. His fingers closed around hers. Take it. Sophie. She froze. She had never told him her name. Then she remembered the identification badge against her chest. His thumb pressed the ring into her palm. Do not let my family have it. Why? His eyes moved toward the door. Because the person who ordered the shooting is already inside the hospital. The heart monitor began to alarm. Sophie reached for the call button. His hand tightened around hers. If I do not wake up, wear it. I am not wearing your ring. For the first time, the corner of his mouth moved. Then they will think you are brave. I am brave. That is what worries me. His hand fell away. The medical team entered and rushed him toward surgery. Sophie stood alone for several seconds with the warm gold ring inside her palm. She should have given it to hospital security. She should have documented it in the patient record. Instead, she remembered Caterina attempting to remove it. Sophie placed the ring in a sealed medication pouch and locked it inside her locker. When she returned from surgery, the lock had been broken. The pouch was gone. The accused woman, after Alessandro awakened and stopped the arrest. Sophie expected the truth to protect her. It did not. By the next morning, photographs of her had appeared across news sites. One image showed Sophie entering the private hospital room. Another showed the ring inside her locker. The headline accused an unnamed nurse of stealing from an unconscious businessman. The hospital suspended her pending investigation. The nursing director avoided her eyes while delivering the decision. Sophie removed her identification badge and placed it on the desk. I protected a patient during a shooting inside this hospital. I know. I worked through the night while armed men filled the corridors. I know. And now I am being punished because his family does not like what he said when he woke up. The director lowered her voice. This is larger than the hospital. That is exactly why you should be doing the right thing. Sophie walked toward the staff elevator, carrying a paper bag containing her shoes, her spare uniform, and the photograph of her late mother that she kept inside the locker. Luca waited beside the doors. Mr. Vitale requested that you return to his room. I am no longer employed here. He did not ask whether you were employed. That is his problem. Sophie entered the elevator. Luca stepped inside before the doors closed. He is not accustomed to hearing that word. What word, no? Luca looked at her. That may be why you are still alive. The elevator opened into the underground parking garage. Sophie walked toward her small gray car. 3 black vehicles followed at walking speed. She stopped and turned. This is unnecessary. Luca opened the rear door of the nearest vehicle. Mr. Vitale ordered an escort. Mr. Vitale can order someone else. A red dot appeared on the chest of Luca. His expression changed. He moved before Sophie understood. Luca pulled her behind the vehicle as a bullet struck the concrete pillar where she had been standing. The garage erupted with movement. Bodyguards drew weapons. Another bullet shattered the window of her car. Sophie covered her head. Luca pushed her into the black vehicle and climbed in after her. Drive. The convoy accelerated out of the garage. Sophie remained pressed against the seat, breathing too quickly. Someone had just tried to kill her. Not frighten her. Not threaten her. Kill her. Luca spoke into a radio. The nurse is secure. The shooter escaped through the service tunnel. A voice answered from the speaker. Bring her to me. Even weakened by injury. The voice of Alessandro carried absolute command. Sophie looked at Luca. Take me to the police. The police officer who tried to arrest you is working for Caterina. Then take me home. Your apartment is no longer safe. I am not going to be imprisoned by your employer. Luca looked out the window. You have misunderstood the situation. What situation? You are not being imprisoned. The vehicle turned onto a private road. Luca looked back at her. You are being hunted. The Vitali residence. The residence of Alessandro stood above the frozen harbor, behind stone walls and iron gates. It was not a home. It was a fortress designed to resemble one. Black vehicles lined the circular driveway. Security cameras moved silently beneath the roof. Men guarded every entrance. Sophie was taken into a library with windows overlooking the gray water. A fire burned beneath a marble fireplace. Alessandro sat in a chair near the window. He wore black pants and an open white shirt that revealed fresh bandages around his chest. His face remained pale, but the weakness she had seen in the hospital was gone from his expression. The ring rested on the table beside him. Sophie placed her paper bag on the floor. You should still be in the hospital. You should not have walked into an open parking garage without protection. I did not know someone wanted to shoot me. Now you do. Alessandro gestured toward the chair opposite him. Sit. I am not one of your employees. No, he said. My employees follow instructions. Sophie remained standing. Why did you give me the ring? Alessandro studied her in silence. His gaze was not the gaze of a patient anymore. It was the gaze of a man deciding how much truth another person could survive. I needed it removed from my body before the second operation. Why? Because the person who ordered the shooting believed the ring contained something valuable. Does it? Yes. What? Alessandro looked toward Luca. Leave us. Luca and the other guards exited. The library doors closed. Alessandro reached for the ring. His fingers pressed against the black stone set into the gold. A narrow piece of metal opened beneath the crest. Inside was a device smaller than the tip of a fingernail. Sophie stared at it. What is that? Evidence. Of what? Payments? Shipments. Accounts. Names. And recorded conversations. You hid all of that inside a ring. People search computers and phones. They do not usually cut open the jewelry of a man they fear. Who was in the recordings? His face hardened. My aunt. Sophie felt cold despite the fire. Caterina arranged the shooting. I believe she approved it. I do not know who pulled the trigger or how many people inside my organization belong to her. Why did you trust me? I did not. The answer stung more than Sophie expected. Alessandro saw it. I trusted what I had observed. He continued. You refused to leave me during the first attack. You noticed that Caterina wanted the ring. You did not ask my men for money. You did not photograph me. You did not behave differently after learning my name. That is not trust. No. It was a calculation. Sophie folded her arms. You placed a target on me because of a calculation. His jaw tightened. I was losing consciousness. I had seconds to choose between a room filled with relatives and one woman who had thrown herself across my body while bullets broke the lights above her. You should have warned me. I did. You said not to give them the ring. I also told you to wear it. You did not explain what that meant. Alessandro looked at the ring. Inside my world, This symbol means that the protection of my house belongs to the person wearing it. Only protection. His eyes returned to hers. That is enough for today. Sophie walked toward him. She took the ring from his hand. He allowed it. She examined the crest. Then she placed the ring back on the table. I will not wear something when I do not understand the promise attached to it. Alessandro leaned back. You are very concerned about promises for a woman who does not trust me. I trust you as a patient. That is not trust. No, Sophie said. It is a calculation. For the second time, something almost like amusement reached his face. Then pain passed through him. His hand pressed against his side. Sophie noticed blood beneath the lower edge of his bandage. She moved closer. You tore the incision. It is nothing. Sit still. She opened the medical case on the table. Alessandro watched as she removed the stained dressing and cleaned the wound. His skin was marked by old scars. A blade had crossed his ribs years earlier. A bullet had entered near his shoulder. Thin white lines covered the knuckles of his hands. Sophie felt his gaze on her. Does this hurt? No. You are lying. I have been shot twice in 2 days. My understanding of pain has become generous. She pressed the clean dressing in place. His breathing changed. Sophie looked up. Their faces were close. The cold control in his eyes had become something heavier. His hand rose. For one suspended second, she thought he would touch her cheek. His fingers stopped near a loose strand of her hair. Then he lowered his hand. Why did you stop? Sophie asked. Because you looked afraid. I am not afraid of you. You should be. She secured the bandage. Perhaps that is what worries you. Alessandro said nothing. A knock sounded at the door. Luca entered. We found a device attached beneath the car of Miss Bennett. Sophie turned. What kind of device? A tracker? Luca placed a small black object on the table. It was installed before she left the hospital. Alessandro looked at it. Caterina wants Sophie frightened enough to run. Why? Because frightened people make mistakes. He looked at Sophie. You will remain here until I know who is watching you. No. This is not a negotiation. Everything involving my life is a negotiation. Alessandro rose. He was taller than she had realized. Even injured. He filled the space between them with controlled threat. Outside this house, there are men willing to put a bullet through your heart to reach what you know. I do not know anything. They cannot be certain of that. And keeping me beside you makes me safer. His eyes moved over her face. No. The honesty unsettled her. Then why do it? Because keeping you beside me is the only way I can breathe without imagining a sniper finding you first. The words remained between them. Alessandro seemed to regret revealing them. His expression closed. You will have the room beside mine. Sophie lifted the ring from the table. She threaded a silver chain from her neck through it and let the ring rest beneath her sweater. Alessandro watched the movement. I am wearing it for protection, she said. Nothing else. His eyes darkened. For now. The voice in the darkness. Sophie remained in the Vitale residence for 6 days. She treated the wounds of Alessandro twice each day. She ate breakfast with armed guards standing outside the dining room. She slept in a bedroom larger than her apartment and woke whenever footsteps passed in the hallway. Alessandro rarely rested. He held meetings behind closed doors. Men arrived at midnight and left before dawn. Every conversation seemed to end with someone looking afraid. Yet the most dangerous moments were not the violent ones. They were the quiet moments when Sophie forgot what he was. On the third night, she found him sitting alone in the dark library. Snow moved beyond the windows. The house was silent. You should be asleep, she said. So should you. I heard you moving. Alessandro looked toward the fire. I do not sleep well. Because of the pain, no. She sat across from him. He held a glass of water. Not alcohol. For several minutes, Neither spoke. Then Alessandro said something she did not expect. I heard you while I was unconscious. Sophie looked at him. What did you hear? You told me that I was not allowed to die because you had not finished the paperwork. She smiled despite herself. That sounds like me. You told me to follow your voice. His expression became distant. Everything else disappeared. The machines, the surgeons, the pain. I could only hear you telling me to stay. That happens sometimes. Patients remember voices. I did not remember the voices of anyone else. Sophie looked toward the snow. You were frightened. I was not frightened. You were dying. I have done both before. She studied him. There was no pride in the statement, only exhaustion. Who were you before people became afraid of you? His eyes turned cold. That man no longer exists. I do not believe that. Belief can be dangerous in this house. So can loneliness. The glass tightened in his hand. Sophie realized she had crossed a line. She started to rise. Alessandro reached out and closed his hand around her wrist. He did not pull her closer. He simply held her there. His thumb rested over her pulse. Do not leave. The command was quiet. It sounded less like authority and more like something he hated needing. Sophie sat again. His hand remained around her wrist for several seconds before he released her. She noticed the red mark left by the handcuff had almost disappeared. Alessandro noticed it too. Detective Mercer will never touch another woman with that hand. Sophie looked sharply at him. What did you do? Nothing permanent. Alessandro. He accepted money to help Caterina remove you. I removed him from his position. That is not what you meant. His face revealed nothing. You cannot hurt everyone who frightens me. No. His gaze dropped briefly to her mouth. Only the ones who believe they can take you from me. Sophie stood. I do not belong to you. Alessandro rose more slowly. The fire cast shadows across his face. I know. Then stop speaking as though I do. He moved closer. I know you do not belong to me. Sophie. His voice lowered. That is becoming the problem. The attack at her apartment. The following morning, Sophie demanded to return to her apartment. She needed clothes, medication records, and the small box containing the photographs of her mother. Alessandro refused. Sophie waited until his meeting began and asked Luca to take her. Luca refused more politely. She threatened to walk through the front gates alone. 20 minutes later, Alessandro entered the vehicle beside her. He wore a black coat over his healing shoulder. You should not be outside, Sophie said. Neither should you. I am not the one with stitches. You are the one with a sniper. The convoy stopped outside her apartment building. Residents watched from windows as 6 armed men stepped onto the sidewalk. Sophie felt humiliation burn across her face. This is excessive. Alessandro looked up at the surrounding roofs. There is no such thing as excessive protection. Inside the building, Sophie found her apartment door open. The lock had been destroyed. Alessandro moved in front of her. Stay behind me. He entered with a weapon in his hand. The apartment had been torn apart. Drawers lay open. Clothing covered the floor. Her mattress had been cut. Plates were broken across the kitchen tiles. The photograph of her mother lay beneath a boot print. Sophie crossed the room and picked it up. The glass had shattered across the smiling face. Alessandro lowered his weapon. He looked around at the small apartment, the second-hand furniture, the books stacked beside the sofa, and the faded curtains Sophie had sewn herself. Something in his expression changed. They did not need to do this, Sophie whispered. They wanted you to know they had been here. She wiped dust from the photograph. Alessandro came closer. Did your mother live here with you? Until she died. He looked at the photograph. You resemble her. She was thinner? That is not what I meant. Sophie looked at him. His eyes remained on her face. A sharp sound came from the window. Alessandro threw himself against her. The glass exploded. They fell behind the sofa as bullets struck the wall. Bodyguards returned fire from the hallway. Alessandro covered Sophie with his body. She felt his breath against her neck and the violent beat of his heart. Blood appeared on his shirt. Your wound. Stay down. You are bleeding. I said stay down. The shooting stopped. Luca entered. The sniper moved across the roof. Our men are following. Alessandro lifted himself. Sophie saw the bandage beneath his shirt turning red. Sit against the wall. This is not the place. You will collapse before we reach the vehicle. She pushed him down beside the sofa. The bodyguards turned away as Sophie opened his shirt and pressed a towel against the torn incision. Alessandro watched her. You are shaking. Someone shot through my window. You did not shake at the hospital. At the hospital, I had work to do. You have work now. You are not work. His gaze sharpened. What am I? Sophie pressed harder against the wound. A dangerous man who refuses medical advice. His hand closed over hers. What am I to you? She could not answer. Footsteps sounded in the hallway. The moment disappeared. Alessandro released her hand and looked toward Luca. Burn this building. Sophie stared at him. What? Remove everyone first. Purchase the property. Tear it down. You cannot destroy my home because someone entered it. It is not safe. It is still mine. His face became hard. Nothing that allows bullets to reach you will remain yours. Sophie stood. That is not protection. That is control. She gathered the broken photograph and walked toward the bedroom. Alessandro followed. Sophie. She turned. You do not get to erase everything because it frightens you. His expression changed. You think I am frightened by this apartment. I think you are frightened that something can exist outside your control. Alessandro took one step closer. I watched a bullet break the window beside your head. He spoke calmly, but something violent moved beneath every word. I knew for 1 second that I might not reach you. I have faced guns since I was 17 years old, and nothing has ever felt like that second. Sophie could not breathe. He looked away first. Take what matters to you. What about the building? He paused at the door. It remained standing. Then his gaze returned to her. Because you asked. The scandal Caterina released the hospital photographs 2 days later. This time, the headlines named Sophie. They called her the curvy nurse who had seduced a wounded criminal. They claimed she had hidden jewelry, demanded money, and moved into the mansion of Alessandro before the hospital investigation ended. Reporters waited outside the gates. Someone found photographs from the funeral of her mother and published them beside cruel comments about her body. The hospital ended her employment. Sophie sat alone in the kitchen when the message arrived. She read it twice. Then she placed the phone face down. Alessandro entered. He saw her expression. What happened? The hospital dismissed me. He held out his hand. Give me the phone. No. Sophie, I do not need you to threaten anyone. They allowed Caterina to destroy your career. She used you to destroy it. His face tightened. You believe I did this? I believe none of it would have happened without your ring. Alessandro remained silent. Sophie pulled the chain from beneath her sweater. The ring caught the morning light. She removed it and placed it on the table. I want to leave. No. You do not own me. I know. Then let me go. He stepped closer. Caterina will kill you before sunset. Then give her the evidence. Never. Why? Because hundreds of people will die if she controls my organization. Sophie laughed without humor. People already die because your organization exists. The words struck him. He did not deny them. Sophie gathered her coat. Alessandro blocked the doorway. Move. I cannot. You mean you will not? His voice became quieter. I cannot allow you to walk outside while every enemy I have knows your face. You created that danger. Yes. For the first time, guilt broke through his control. I did. Sophie looked at the man everyone feared. He looked exhausted. Not physically. Emotionally. What happens now? She asked. Alessandro reached into his coat and placed a document on the table. A public announcement. Sophie read the first line. Her eyes widened. You are announcing that we are engaged. It ends the theft accusation. It confirms everything they are saying. No. It tells the world that the ring belongs to you. It does not belong to me. His eyes moved to the gold ring on the table. It can. Sophie pushed the paper away. I will not pretend to be your future wife, so your family respects me. They will not respect you. His voice turned cold. They will fear touching you. There is a difference. I know. Do you, Alessandro, picked up the ring? His thumb moved over the crest. My family believes affection is weakness. Caterina will use every feeling I have against me. Sophie held his gaze. Do you have feelings for me? Silence filled the kitchen. He took one step toward her. His hand rose and stopped beside her face. The same hesitation. The same restrained hunger. You are asking a question that could make both of us less safe. That is not an answer. It is the only one I have. Sophie looked at the announcement again. How long? Until Caterina is removed. And afterward, you walk away with your name restored and enough money to begin any life you choose. I do not want your money. I know. His eyes remained on hers. That is why I cannot stop thinking about you. The engagement gala. The Vitali engagement gala took place inside a hotel overlooking Boston Harbor. 300 guests filled the ballroom. Politicians, judges, investors, and men whose names never appeared in newspapers gathered beneath chandeliers and watched Sophie enter beside Alessandro. She wore a dark green dress that followed the soft curves of her body. The ring rested on a chain beneath the fabric. Alessandro wore a black suit. His hand remained near the center of her back, not touching. Almost touching. The distance felt more intimate than contact. Every conversation softened as they passed. Sophie recognized several people who had publicly accused her of theft. None met her eyes. At the center of the ballroom waited Elena Rinaldi. Elena was the daughter of a powerful allied family. She was tall, elegant, and had once been expected to marry Alessandro. Caterina stood beside her. The sight of Sophie produced a small smile on the face of Caterina. What a remarkable transformation. Caterina said, Several days ago, you were a nurse accused of stealing a ring. Tonight, you arrive wearing a dress purchased by the man you robbed. Alessandro stopped. Sophie felt the entire ballroom listening. She answered before he could. The dress was selected by me. The invoice will be sent to my new employer. Elena laughed softly. Your employer, Sophie, looked at Alessandro. He said this was a professional arrangement. A dangerous stillness entered his eyes. Elena stepped closer. You should be careful. Sophie, men like Alessandro may enjoy rescuing ordinary women, but they marry women who understand their world. Alessandro turned toward Elena. Leave. Her smile disappeared. This hotel belongs to my father. Tonight, it belongs to me. Caterina looked around at the watching guests. You are creating a spectacle because a nurse cannot accept the truth. The truth, Sophie said, is that your family accused me of stealing something Alessandro placed in my hand. Caterina raised her voice. Then where is the ring? Sophie felt every eye move toward her hands. Her fingers were bare. Caterina smiled. A protected woman wears the symbol of her protector. A claimed woman wears it where the world can see. Sophie turned toward Alessandro. Claimed. He did not look away. The ring means more than protection, she said. In my family, yes, you lied to me. I did not tell you everything. That is another way to describe a lie. She reached beneath her dress and pulled the chain free. The ring shone beneath the chandeliers. Sophie removed it from the chain and held it toward him. I will not wear a promise that was never offered, honestly. Alessandro looked at the ring in her palm. The ballroom waited. Caterina appeared almost pleased. Then Alessandro lowered himself to one knee. Shock moved through the guests. The most feared man in the city knelt before a nurse his family had called a thief. He took the ring from her palm. Sophie could not move. Alessandro looked up at her. I gave you this ring because I was surrounded by my blood and trusted none of them. His voice carried across the silent ballroom. I gave it to the only person who protected me without asking who I was or what she would receive. Caterina stepped forward. Alessandro. He ignored her. He looked only at Sophie. This ring began as a warning. Then it became protection. Tonight, I am asking whether you will wear it as a promise that no one in my world will ever stand above you. Sophie felt tears press against her eyes. Is this still an arrangement? Pain moved through his expression. It should be. That was not what she wanted to hear. Alessandro continued. But I have discovered that what should happen and what I want are no longer the same thing. The silence became unbearable. Sophie held out her hand. Alessandro slid the ring onto her finger. It was too large. He closed his hand around hers to hold it in place. Every person in the ballroom watched. Alessandro rose and turned toward Caterina. Anyone who calls Sophie a thief calls me a liar. His gaze moved across the room. Anyone who touches her answers to me. The orchestra began playing again. Alessandro placed one hand at the waist of Sophie and led her onto the dance floor. She moved reluctantly into his arms. You used the entire room to force my answer. She whispered. You could have walked away. Your guards are blocking every door. They are keeping Caterina inside. Sophie looked up at him. What happens tonight, I expose her alliances. And if she knows, she does. His hand tightened at her waist. That is why you will not leave my side. The lights suddenly went out. A woman screamed. Alessandro pulled Sophie against his chest. Gunfire cracked from the balcony. Bodyguards surrounded them. Alessandro pushed Sophie beneath the marble edge of the stage and covered her with his body. Emergency lights turned the ballroom red. Guests crawled beneath tables. Another bullet struck the floor. Sophie felt Alessandro reach for his weapon. Do not move, he said. Neither should you. I am going to end this. She grabbed his coat. Do not leave me here. He looked at her. For the first time, the desire in his face was not restrained. He cupped the back of her neck and pressed his forehead against hers. I would burn this entire city before I left you. Then the lights returned. The shooters were gone. So was Caterina. The betrayal. The evidence inside the ring revealed accounts connected to Caterina, but the most damaging files remained encrypted. Only Caterina knew the final access phrase. Alessandro prepared to force her into the open. He became colder after the gala. He spent hours in the underground security room. He stopped entering the bedroom of Sophie at night. When they passed in the hall, his gaze followed her. But he did not touch her. The distance hurt more than Sophie wanted to admit. 3 nights later, she entered his study and heard him speaking to Luca. St. Gabriel Church. Alessandro said, midnight tomorrow. And Sophie Luca asked, I will deliver her myself. Sophie stopped outside the partially open door. Luca lowered his voice. Caterina may kill her even if you surrender the ring. She will not receive the ring until Sophie is released. You are trusting Caterina to honor an exchange. I am trusting her greed. Sophie stepped backward. A floorboard moved beneath her foot. The conversation stopped. She walked quickly toward her room. Alessandro followed. Sophie. She closed the door. He opened it. You are trading me to Caterina. His expression revealed nothing. What did you hear? Enough. No? You heard part of a plan, then explain the rest. I cannot? She laughed bitterly. You cannot? Or you do not trust me? Alessandro entered the room. Caterina has people inside this house. If she learns the plan, you die. So I am supposed to follow you into a church and believe you will not hand me to the woman who destroyed my life. Yes. Why his control finally broke? Because I would destroy everything carrying my name before I gave you to her. Then tell me the plan. I cannot. You keep asking for my trust while giving me nothing. I gave you my ring. You gave me a target. His face tightened. Sophie pulled the ring from her finger. Alessandro looked at it. Do not remove that. It did not stop Caterina from shooting at me. It tells every loyal man in my world that you are protected. I am tired of being protected by men who make decisions without me. She placed the ring on the table. I am leaving. No. You cannot lock me inside this house. Watch me. The words were cold. Sophie stared at him. Alessandro immediately regretted them. But he did not take them back. This is what you really are, she whispered. The moment I refuse you, protection becomes a prison. He stepped toward her. I am trying to keep you alive, and I am trying to remain myself. She walked past him. He caught her wrist. Sophie looked down at his hand. Alessandro released her. His voice became quiet. Do not leave tonight. Is that a command? No. For the first time since she had met him, he sounded uncertain. It is a request. Sophie looked into his eyes. Then tell me you love me. The words frightened both of them. Alessandro became motionless. Sophie waited. His silence was the answer. She walked away. At dawn, Luca drove her to a safe apartment owned by the family. Sophie believed Alessandro had allowed her to leave. She did not know that the real Luca had been found unconscious in the security garage 1 hour later. The man driving wore the same black coat. He also wore the face of someone Sophie had seen once before. The shooter in hospital scrubs. She recognized him as the vehicle entered an abandoned industrial road. Sophie reached for the door. The locks engaged. The driver smiled in the mirror. Caterina has been waiting for you. St. Gabriel Church. The abandoned church stood near the harbor, where the oldest neighborhoods of Boston met the water. Snow covered the broken steps. Black clouds moved above the bell tower. Inside, candles burned along the ruined altar. Caterina waited beneath a cracked statue of an angel. 2 armed men forced Sophie forward. The false driver removed the ring from his pocket. You left this behind, he said. Sophie stared at it. He had taken it from the table after she left the room of Alessandro. Caterina accepted the ring. You have caused extraordinary damage for an ordinary woman. Sophie looked around the church. Where is Alessandro? He believes you escaped his protection. He will come when we send the photograph. Caterina held up a phone. One of the men forced Sophie to her knees. Caterina photographed her beneath the ruined altar. Why do you need me if you have the ring? Because my nephew changed the encryption after the shooting. The final file requires 2 access codes. I do not know any code. Caterina crouched in front of her. Alessandro speaks while he sleeps. Sophie said nothing. Caterina smiled. He has never allowed another person near him when he was vulnerable. Yet you slept beside his room for 6 nights. He calls your name during the hours before dawn. The words struck Sophie. Caterina touched the ring against her cheek. Tell me what he said. Nothing. The shooter grabbed the hair of Sophie. Caterina raised one hand. Do not damage her face. Alessandro must recognize what his weakness has cost him. Sophie looked at the elegant woman. You are afraid of him. Caterina stood. I created him. You tried to kill him. I tried to save this family from a man who had become sentimental. Sophie almost laughed. Alessandro is many things. Sentimental is not one of them. He destroyed a shipping alliance because one driver frightened you. He purchased your apartment building because a bullet touched your window. He ended a political agreement that required 10 years to create because Elena insulted you in public. Katerina leaned closer. He has become irrational. No, Sophie said. He finally found something he could not purchase or command. Anger entered the eyes of Katerina. And what is that? A reason to become better than his family. The church doors exploded inward. Wind and snow swept across the stone floor. Alessandro stood in the entrance. He wore a black coat over a dark shirt. Blood covered one side of his face. Behind him, armed men filled the doorway. His eyes found Sophie. The relief in his expression lasted less than a second. Then he looked at the man holding her. Move your hand away from her, Alessandro said. The man tightened his grip. Katerina held the ring toward the candlelight. You were always dramatic. Alessandro walked down the center aisle. His weapon remained at his side. Release Sophie. Give me the access phrase. You do not need it. I need control of the accounts. You want control of the family. I held this family together while you were still learning how to load a weapon. You sold our routes to men who traffic children. A murmur moved among the guards of Katerina. Her face changed. Alessandro continued walking. You ordered my shooting because I closed the harbor shipments. You bribed hospital employees. You paid Mercer to arrest Sophie. You believed I would protect the name of Vitali before I protected the innocent people you used. Katerina smiled. Will you not? Alessandro stopped several feet from Sophie. His gaze lowered to her wrists. Rope had cut the skin. Something violent entered his face. Katerina lifted a weapon and pressed it against the head of Sophie. Choose carefully. Alessandro looked at his aunt. There is nothing left to choose. He removed a small device from his coat. On the screen appeared rows of financial records. The evidence from the ring. Katerina stared. You needed the access phrase. Sophie opened the file. Katerina looked at her. Sophie remembered the night when Alessandro had spoken in his sleep. He had repeated 2 words. Not a name. Not a number. Follow her. At the time, Sophie had believed he was trapped in a memory. Later, she realized the words had appeared in the medical notes she recorded on her phone. Follow her was the command that unlocked the hidden file. Sophie looked at Alessandro. You trusted me with the second code. His voice softened. I trusted your voice before I trusted your name. Katerina fired. Alessandro moved in front of Sophie. The bullet struck his shoulder. Gunfire erupted through the church. Alessandro pulled Sophie behind the stone altar. Glass broke from the windows. Candles fell and ignited the cloth near the steps. Smoke filled the sanctuary. Sophie pressed her hand against the wound of Alessandro. You were shot again. I noticed. You cannot keep doing this. His hand cupped her face. Are you hurt? No. He looked over her carefully, as though he did not believe her. Another bullet struck the altar. Alessandro pulled her against him. Luca and the guards advanced through the church. Katerina fled toward the side entrance. Alessandro started to rise. Sophie caught his coat. Let her go. She will return. You are bleeding. He looked toward the escaping figure of his aunt. Then he looked at Sophie. For his entire life, Alessandro had chosen power first. He had chased enemies through gunfire. He had allowed wounded men to die because hesitation invited weakness. Now the woman who had betrayed him was escaping with the secrets of his family. Sophie saw the decision in his eyes. Alessandro lowered the weapon. He chose her. He lifted Sophie into his arms. I can walk. I know. Then put me down. No. The burning cloth spread across the altar. Alessandro carried her through smoke, broken glass, and falling snow. Blood covered his coat. Outside, black vehicles surrounded the church. Bodyguards opened a path toward the nearest one. Sophie looked over the shoulder of Alessandro. Caterina was running toward a helicopter on the rooftop of an abandoned warehouse across the street. A man stood in the bell tower above them. Metal caught the light. Sophie saw the rifle. Alessandro. Down. She pulled him sideways. The bullet passed above his head. His men fired toward the tower. Alessandro fell behind a vehicle with Sophie still in his arms. Their faces were inches apart. His breathing was rough. Sophie touched the blood on his cheek. "You saved me," he said. "You saved me first. I am not counting the first time. Neither am I." Luca approached. Caterina reached the helicopter. Alessandro looked toward the roof. "Take her alive." Luca signaled the vehicles. The helicopter engine began to turn. Then the pilot shut it down. He stepped out with his hands raised. Caterina stood alone beside the aircraft as Vitali guards surrounded the roof. Alessandro watched until Luca confirmed her capture. Only then did his body weaken. Sophie felt him lean against the vehicle. Alessandro. His eyes closed. She caught his face between her hands. "Follow my voice." His eyes opened again. Sophie pressed her forehead to his. "You are not allowed to die. I have not finished the paperwork." A faint smile touched his mouth. That voice again. "Stay with me." His hand found hers. The ring was still held inside the fingers of Caterina when Luca captured her. He had removed it and brought it downstairs. Alessandro took the ring. He pressed it into the palm of Sophie. This time, she closed her fingers around it. The man without the ring, Alessandro, survived the third bullet. The injury damaged muscle, but missed the major artery. Caterina was charged through a network of federal investigations that began when the encrypted files were released. Judges resigned. Detective Mercer disappeared into protective custody. Several businesses connected to the Vitali family closed before the end of winter. Alessandro did not surrender the entire empire. He dismantled the routes controlled by Caterina and removed every man who had profited from them. Some decisions remained hidden behind locked doors. Sophie knew he had not become innocent. He had become something more difficult. A powerful man trying to choose what kind of power he would keep. Sophie returned to St. Augustine Medical Center only once. The hospital offered her position back after the public evidence cleared her name. She declined. Instead, she rented an empty medical office near the neighborhood where she had grown up. She planned to open a clinic for patients who could not afford private care. The building needed repairs. The roof leaked. The waiting room contained 4 mismatched chairs. Sophie loved it immediately. She did not see Alessandro for 3 weeks. He sent no guards. He sent no black vehicles. He sent no commands. The silence hurt. But it also proved that he had heard her. Protection could not become a prison. One morning, Sophie arrived to find a man repairing the front steps. Another replaced the broken windows. A truck delivered new medical equipment. She walked into the clinic and found Alessandro standing beneath the unfinished ceiling. He wore a black coat. His shoulder remained stiff beneath it. Sophie looked at the workers. "I did not ask for this." "No." "Then why are they here?" "The building belongs to a charitable foundation." "Which charitable foundation?" "Yours." She stared at him. "I do not have a foundation." "You do now." "Alessandro." He held up one hand. "There are no conditions. No cameras. No guards inside the building. The documents are in your name. You cannot purchase forgiveness." "I know." He reached into his coat. The signet ring rested in his palm. Sophie looked at it. "Why are you not wearing it?" he asked. "Because it is yours." Alessandro stepped closer. "It stopped being mine when I placed it in your hand. You never asked me what I wanted it to mean." "I know." He lowered himself to one knee on the unfinished clinic floor. Sophie forgot how to breathe. There were no chandeliers, no armed family members, no ballroom filled with witnesses. Only morning light, fresh paint, and the sound of workers becoming very quiet outside. Alessandro looked up at her. I spent my life believing fear was the only promise people respected. Then a nurse stood over me beneath broken hospital lights and refused to let me die. His voice became quieter. You challenged every order. You walked away when my protection became control. You made me understand that devotion without freedom is another form of violence. Sophie felt tears reach her eyes. He held the ring toward her. I cannot promise that my world will ever be safe. I cannot promise that every choice I make will be clean. I can promise that I will never again confuse loving you with owning you. Sophie looked at the feared man kneeling before her. What are you asking? For the first time? Uncertainty entered his face without anger following it. I am asking you to choose me. Not because you need protection. Not because Katerina made you a target. Not because the world expects the ring on your hand. Choose me because when I wake in darkness, your voice is still the only thing that leads me out. Sophie held out her left hand. Alessandro stopped. Is that a yes? You are not very patient for a man who waited 3 weeks. Sophie. Yes. The word changed him. Not into someone soft. Alessandro Vitali would never be soft. But the loneliness left his eyes. He slid the ring onto her finger. This time, it fit. Sophie looked down. You had it resized. I had it resized the morning after the gala. You were very confident. I was terrified. She smiled. Alessandro rose. His hand touched her cheek. He paused as he always had. Sophie closed the distance herself. Their first kiss was not gentle. It carried every interrupted moment, every denied confession, every bullet, every night of fear, and every promise neither of them had known how to speak. When they separated, his forehead remained against hers. There is one more condition, Sophie said. His eyes narrowed. What condition? You attend every medical appointment. Agreed. You stop tearing your stitches to prove you are powerful. Impossible. She looked at him. Alessandro exhaled. Agreed. And no armed guards inside the clinic unless there is an actual emergency. He looked toward the window, where Luca was pretending not to listen. 2 guards. 1. 2. Sophie folded her arms. Alessandro considered her 1 guard and a vehicle across the street. That is not 1 guard. It is the closest you will receive to victory. She smiled again. Alessandro touched the ring on her hand. The expression in his eyes became possessive, but no longer controlling. It was the gaze of a man who knew she could leave and understood that her choice to remain was the most powerful thing he would ever possess. Months later, the clinic opened beneath a clear spring sky. Families filled the waiting room. Children played beside the windows. Sophie moved from patient to patient while Alessandro waited near the entrance in a dark suit. People still became silent when they recognized him. Men still feared his name. Enemies still watched from distant places. But when Sophie crossed the room, Alessandro looked at her as though nothing else existed. A small boy noticed the ring and asked whether it belonged to a king. Sophie looked toward Alessandro. No, she said. It belonged to a man who thought power meant never needing anyone. The boy considered this. What does it mean now? Alessandro approached and placed his hand at the waist of Sophie. She looked up at him. It means he finally learned better. Outside, black vehicles waited beneath the sunlight. Inside, laughter moved through the clinic. Alessandro bent close to her ear. Why are you smiling? Because everyone once believed I stole your ring. His thumb moved over the gold band. You did steal something. Sophie raised one eyebrow. What did I steal? The cold control in his face softened only for her. The life I thought I wanted. Sophie rested her hand over his heart. And what did you receive in return? Alessandro looked around the bright clinic, then back at the woman who had followed his voice through blood, darkness, and betrayal. Everything. This time, when he asked why she was not wearing his ring, Sophie smiled, lifted her hand into the morning light, and showed him that she had finally chosen to wear it forever.